Good evening and welcome to Money Matters. My name is Charlie Huntington and I am the Public Relations Chairperson for Life Sciences PA. Life Sciences PA is the voice of advancement for Pennsylvania's biotech, pharmaceutical, medical device, healthcare IT, and CRO industries. Tonight we continue our special series on science leaders in our local community, but I'd first like to remind our viewers that financial issues relating to life sciences, healthcare, or technology matters or companies may be discussed on the show. These discussions are not and should be not viewed as financial advice. Moreover, since this program is recorded and shown at a later date, please keep in mind that the information may no longer be current. You should always consult your financial advisor before entering into any financial transaction. I'm privileged to have with me tonight my co-host, Kimon Hatza. Kimon is a partner with MillCrest Law in Radnor, Pennsylvania, and his practice includes life science, healthcare, and information technology areas. Welcome, Kimon.
Charlie, thank you. Glad to be here.
Thanks.
So, Charlie, I heard you introduce yourself as the Public Relations Chairperson for Life Sciences PA, and I know that either I've been introducing you or you've been introducing yourself as being in that role for Pennsylvania Bio. So I assume some sort of rebranding has happened since our last show. I was wondering if you could take a few minutes and tell our viewers about that.
Thanks, Kimon. I'd be happy to. So Pennsylvania Bio has been around now for about 27 years, and it was started up in State College, Pennsylvania by, it was actually a school project that led into a few businessmen, scientists putting together Pennsylvania Bio. It came down here to the Great Valley area specifically in the 1990s, and then at that time it has morphed, the membership has changed into today there are 700 companies, up from 300 companies in 2007. And the industries today represent biotech, the funding companies, medical device companies, pharma, research out of universities, service organizations, clinical research organizations, as well as patient advocacy organizations. So we thought it would be a good time to go through a rebranding, and the name we came up with is Life Sciences PA. We're very pleased about that.
Sure, and it certainly captures the membership of the organization at this point.
Thank you. So I'd like to remind viewers how they can get questions answered on a future show. Here's how you do it.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says, Send us your questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, M-O-N-E-Y, -matters, M-A-T-T-E-R-S, TV.com.
It's with great pleasure that I get to introduce our special guest tonight, Francis Humann. Francis is President and CEO of OncoVIRX. He was a Senior Director and New Product Marketing Manager for Icaria. He has also been the Executive Director for Customer and Market Insight Partner Team Leader for Pfizer. Before that, he was Executive Director for Tigasil in the U.S., used to treat bacterial infections of the skin or the digestive system. He's been a director for the Pharmaceutical Products Division and Direct Marketing for Abbott in the Philippines. He has his MBA in Finance from the Columbia Business School, and he has a BA in History and Economics from Emory. Francis, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Can you tell us about OncoVIRX, please?
Sure. OncoVIRX is a company affiliated with the University of Pennsylvania that is focused on developing novel therapies for hard-to-treat blood cancer. It was founded several years ago by a professor there, and with the help of the university, created the company, and then I was brought on board to lead the charge.
So how How did that come about? Who was this professor?
It's Earl Robertson, who is a professor in the medical school, and he's an interesting fellow. He's a virologist by training, but his focus is on viruses that cause these blood cancers. And so about 8 years ago, he began to look at potential therapeutic options to treat these malignancies.
Okay. And so you mentioned that the company is connected to the University of Pennsylvania. How did you wind up with the technology? How did you get connected? Is it a specific program within the University of Pennsylvania? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It is. It's called the Upstart program. About 5 or 6 years ago, the university decided they wanted to help professors bring their technology to market instead of simply out-licensing it. Okay. So they created this incubator. It services the entire university, but the bulk of their work is the School of Engineering and the School of Medicine, not surprisingly. And so they work with these professors to, one, formally create these companies, and then staff them with CEOs. And so they'll come to people like myself who have industry experience and see if we're game to give it a try. In my case, as you pointed out, I had worked in big pharma for a number of years and decided I wanted to do something a little bit more entrepreneurial. As an interim step, I went to Icaria, which is a specialty pharmaceutical company that's since been bought, and I was the senior commercial person for their pipeline. So I'd work with the R&D teams on programs everywhere from the various early stages all the way through to phase 3, which is the last phase of clinical trial development before you then go to the FDA. And so based on my big pharma experience, my experience working with R&D, when I was approached about working with the University of Pennsylvania, I thought this is a really nice next step in my career. And I haven't been disappointed yet.
Well, we've had a few companies come through. Kimon, you agree with that?
Sure.
Michael Poisel, right?
Yes.
Has been a big advocate for the show, as well as Pennsylvania and New Jersey, for that matter, in terms of spinning some of these companies out. So a little bit more about your company. What are you all doing that's different from how things are being done now?
So we are working on what are called small molecules, which are basically chemicals, versus what most companies are currently working on now, which are called biologics, which are these great big huge honking proteins.
Okay.
And while small molecule therapies have been around for some time, ours works on a very novel area of the cancer cell that nobody else has successfully been able to work with. And we're still fairly early stage, but we've had a couple of important breakthroughs recently, and we're now in the process of looking for funds to get the technology out of the university formally and into our own labs.
Okay. And tell us a little bit about the company name. Where did that come from?
So originally, when Earl began this work, he was really focused in again on tumors that are caused by viruses. So onco for oncology, and then VIRX for virus, and RX, for therapy. And what he had done is access the NCI, National Cancer Institute's drug library, and did a lot of work looking at which drugs there would work against these virus-caused malignancies. And as a control, he used virus-negative cell lines as well. And that was the direction he was going. And then when I came in and looked at his data, I said, hold on a second here. You work not just in virus-positive, but virus-negative, so we need to expand out our focus. But we both liked the name enough, we said, why change it?
Okay.
So we stayed the course on that.
Was this his first company? Or
It is.
It is, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit about financing, but before I get into that, I do want to stay on some of the things that you just mentioned. Do you have proprietary intellectual property that you're developing or have developed at this point?
Yes. When one works with compounds out of a government library, it's in the public domain, it's very difficult to get any intellectual property around it. However, if you make novel changes to those compounds, which is what we're doing, as long as they're not obvious changes, then they're treated like a truly novel, completely from scratch compound, and we can get very good patent protection on it.
What is it, if I can drill down a little bit, what is it that you're hoping to do with the compound that you're developing?
So what we are hoping to do is have a compound that targets a novel area, mechanism of action, if you will, that nobody else does. Now, in oncology therapy, it's generally the case that therapy is a cocktail of a lot of different drugs, each one targeting a different mechanism. And so if we are successful, what will happen is we will be added to that cocktail, and potentially older compounds that are known to have a nasty side effect profile can be either reduced in terms of dosage or taken out altogether.
Wow. I mean, that would be good because, as you and I had spoken before the show, some of those side effects can be really, really severe.
That's right. The other nice thing about what we're working on is, as a small molecule, we're less expensive to manufacture. So when we make it to market, we'll be able to provide a relatively cost-effective option as compared to some of these biologics that are extremely expensive to make.
Does what you're working on work differently than these biologics?
They do, yeah.
Okay.
So your competitors would be using biologics?
The majority of the programs currently in development are these biologics. And as I mentioned, in oncology, they're competitors and they're not, because we're used in conjunction with them. I'd say the biggest competitor in this area are the older generic drugs that seem to be still efficacious but come with
Side
baggage.
effects.
Somewhat.
Exactly.
All right. So there's a possibility, as you just said, that you could either be replacing those or at least reducing the amount of those that are in these cocktails that are treating cancer patients, so to help reduce the side effects.
Yes.
What do you see as the biggest barriers, to entry into your industry?
Well, certainly cost is number one. It is very, very expensive to bring any drug to market. It's a lengthy process, and you need to really study it pretty extensively in people, and so all that adds up. The other thing that's somewhat unique to oncology is that though you study these early on in animals, they aren't very predictive. They aren't as predictive as they are in other therapeutic areas. And there's been a long-standing joke within oncology that we've been curing cancer in mice for about 30 years, but we have not had the same kind of luck when you get to humans.
Well, talking about cost of bringing a drug to market, and one of the issues that we talk about and hear about a lot in our shows is funding, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you're currently being funded.
So it's a bootstrap operation like most of these companies are early on. So part of it is what I'll call friends and family. But Earl is in a little bit of a unique situation where he does have some discretionary budget that he can use to do his work. And he's also funding a partner lab at the university on the medicinal chemistry side. And so all the R&D is currently still at the university, but our hope is within the next 6 months to migrate it out and into our own labs. To accomplish that, we have applied for a grant with the National Cancer Institute. So we're hopeful that we'll get a good answer in the not too distant future.
Good for you. Good luck.
So, all right. So that is sort of the next step in terms of the financing piece. Is there anything else you're thinking about, like longer term down the road, how you might go about funding the growth of your company?
Yes, we have actually mapped out a pretty robust funding schedule. So I mentioned the NCI grant. Best case, it's about $300,000, which will get us started.
Started in phase 1. You mentioned there are 3 phases.
Well, there are 3 phases in clinical development, but before you can even get into humans, you need to do work leading up to what's called an IND, investigational new drug application with the FDA, which is basically permission to even look at this in people. And that's what we're trying to fund now. So this is where you do the animal studies, and you do additional lab work. One area that people sometimes forget about, which is critically important, is just because you can make the therapy in a lab doesn't mean that you can make it in a manufacturing facility. And so that work also needs to happen. So the NCI has a pot of money that they can use to fund small companies like ours, and will get us to a certain point. Then there are funding options within the state of Pennsylvania that provide matching funds. Ben Franklin is one. Phase 1 Ventures at the Science Center is another one. And then there is a second phase of NCI financing that is available provided that the work we've done to that point has generated positive results. And it's really at that point that we can then go to venture capital and or strategic partners in big pharma.
Okay. Okay. That's where the latter, those would help you through phases 1, 2, 3.
Exactly.
Okay.
So when you begin to talk to them, they want to see enough data to suggest that you've got a very good chance of getting approved by the FDA to go into humans, or at least are well on the path down that road.
Okay.
Now in oncology, they are willing to look at earlier stage companies, but as a general rule, that's where they want to see you.
Okay.
Lots of times we hear, at least the VC community, the venture capital community, when looking at a company like this, they want to know, particularly something that's coming out of a university, they want to know that they have a committed full-time scientist to this company, and not someone who maybe doesn't have as much incentive because he or she has the ability to go back to the university.
Sure.
Have you run into any? I mean, I understand you don't have venture capital, financing, but has that issue ever come up, or have you ever heard anything about anything like that?
Yes, certainly the people that I've spoken with in the venture capital community want a couple of things. That's certainly one, that you have a dedicated lead scientist who really knows what they're doing and has skin in the game, as they say. And they want the same of the CEO.
Okay.
They don't want the CEO doing this part-time and then doing something else on the side. In our case, we're very fortunate because Earl Robertson had a postdoctoral fellow doing the bulk of the day-to-day work on the program, and he's agreed to join us full-time when we get the necessary funding. And
his role would be scientist.
He would be our lead scientist. That's
Okay.
exactly right.
Okay.
And so we're in good shape. The other thing that we're doing is we're engaging people on our scientific advisory board who are very, very experienced, who in theory can transition into the company once we get additional funding. So I'm not too worried about staffing in this particular case, although many of my colleagues at other companies do have some sleepless nights having to tackle that one.
Definitely. Okay. So what would success look like for your company?
So really that's both a short and a long-term answer. In the short term, we are working to optimize the molecule. And what do I mean by that? What we're trying to do is retain all the good attributes. In this case, it kills cancer cells, while solving for some downsides of it. In this particular case, it doesn't stay in the body really long enough to do the job. And so that's where medicinal chemistry comes in to make the tweaks. So early success for us is having this novel molecule based on the parent compound that meets those criteria and allows us to really begin to do the animal work necessary and begin collecting the data for the IND. Okay. So that's early stage. Early middle stage would be that data being compelling enough to get the funding we've been talking about. And then of course long term is ending up with a product on the market that saves patients' lives. I mean that is the ultimate goal.
Okay. So we for years have thrown around the figure about 1.2 billion is what it takes to get a drug to market. Is that still a current figure that you, when you hear and from your past time at Pfizer and others, is that about the amount that people say on average companies are having to spend to get a drug to market these days?
Yeah, there are a couple different ways that people look at that. One is to look at or to factor in your failures. And so when you factor that all in,
good point.
It's a couple $1 billion. For an individual drug, assuming it's going to be successful, you can get some variability depending on what therapeutic area it is. So for example, if you're developing a new blood pressure medicine, for example, or a lipid lowering agent, your clinical trials have to be enormous. And yes, you certainly get up into very big numbers. In oncology,
don't mean to cut you off, but why would they have to be enormous? Because you're replacing such a prevalent product that's out in the mainstream already, or what? Why would they have to be a bigger patient sample than?
It's partly to make sure that they work well when the differences may be small, but it's more an issue of safety database for patients. So the FDA's view is, okay, you're developing a drug that will provide maybe this much more benefit, which is important, But it's not enough for us to say it's okay to have a drug that may have a side effect profile problem. And so
Okay.
therefore you need very large trials to demonstrate to the FDA's satisfaction that you're not going to hurt people.
Are these the Me Too products we hear about?
Yeah, I think it's
Okay.
probably a fair way of putting
Okay.
it. Now you go the opposite direction to oncology, which is obviously, cancer is a deadly disease. The FDA is more accepting of drugs that have less than favorable side effect profile. And so therefore your trials tend not to be as big. And in addition, they do want to try and help companies get their products to market quickly, provided they're effective, because it's an area of high unmet medical need.
Okay. So, have you discovered any other directions your company could go?
Absolutely, yeah. So there is an opportunity for us to develop a pipeline.
Okay.
A lot of these upstart companies start off as one program companies, but in drug development it's really about shots on goal, because as we discussed earlier, you just don't know whether it's going to work until you know.
Right.
And so it's nice to have a couple of things going on. And as we, as a company, establish a reputation within the university environment, we become an attractive vehicle for additional programs to ultimately become commercialized. In addition, there are other institutions in University City that are looking for similar, again, vehicles. Wistar would be a good example.
Mm-hmm.
And as a matter of fact, we are collaborating with them on our current program. And based on how that goes, there may be an opportunity for us to work with them on some of their other programs.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
You had mentioned to me again prior to the show that, and you had mentioned during the show, obviously, that you were focusing on the blood cancer market.
Correct. Yeah.
Are there other applications, of your product, of your intellectual property that are out there, and maybe an opportunity for you in addition to that?
Yes, we believe there are other areas within oncology. The NCI has a panel of 60 different types of cancers. Some are blood cancers, some are solid cancers, such as breast cancer, ovarian. And in the case of the parent compound, they've screened it, and it is shown to have potency in some of the solid organ tumors, such as ovarian and breast as well. So the answer is yes. We think that our initial focus should be on some of these blood cancers, because that's where we think the greater need is. But one way to potentially look at this program is that it is a portfolio within a single molecule. And so we're guardedly optimistic about the opportunity outside of these blood cancers.
Okay.
There was one question I wanted to ask you earlier, so forgive me because I keep looping back, but as Charlie introduced you this evening, and I saw that you had a lot of experience in the marketing area in the pharmaceutical industry. And marketing is obviously a very broad area. Those of us who aren't in the space might not think so, but I know that it covers a lot of ground. I was wondering how you felt your marketing experience prepared you for being the role of CEO, prepared you for the role of CEO of
Something this early.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So when people think of marketing in the pharmaceutical world, they typically think of the people that are marketing drugs that are currently on the market. That's called line marketing. But there's also a group of people that are strategic marketers whose role in the company is to work with the R&D groups to, in a very early stage, to prepare to get these drugs to market. And why that's important is the commercial person is able to guide where the great unmet need is, and they're also able to give guidance to the R&D people as to what data is really important to be collected during the clinical trials. They tend to be very focused on the data that the FDA wants to see, but that's not always what treating clinicians want to see, and the commercial people have the ability to give that insight so that when you come to market, you can provide information to healthcare providers that they feel is relevant. Mm-hmm. In my particular case, I have both the line marketing and the strategic marketing experience. And then, while at Acari in particular, I was doing nothing but R&D. as the senior commercial person on the R&D teams, and as I mentioned, I worked on programs everywhere from preclinical, pre-IND, all the way through to phase 3. And so I like to say that I don't know all the answers, I don't know most of the answers, but I know what I don't know, and I know where to go to get the answers.
It's a good answer.
Yeah, it is.
And it's interesting, when you look at my colleagues in the upstart environment, they do come from a whole host of different backgrounds. They're all life science people, but you've got people that are former regulators, manufacturing people, some doctors, so the development side, some PhDs, and so it's an interesting mix. And I think it's fair to say that they will all agree none of them have all the answers. So it's really, for a CEO, it's just important to know what you know and don't know, and more importantly, your ability to pull the team together and get the right people in the right seats.
So, sticking with that, those same skill sets you just mentioned, maybe law, science, even HR. We've seen finance, certainly. We've seen these folks, some of them displaced by big pharma, and some of them will approach universities just like you have and say, will you give me a compound to work on? Can I help a scientist who's here? What advice would you have for those colleagues?
First, I'd say it is a wonderful experience, and when you're in big pharma, you feel like you're contributing most but not all the time. There's a bureaucracy to deal with, presentations to give. Here, everything you do has an immediate impact on the direction of the company. It's very fulfilling. However, I would probably warn people not to jump in right away, that it's probably good to get some experience halfway there, as I did, at a smaller firm, where you can get a broader view of what's going on before you then make that jump. The other thing I'll say is that these companies are not well funded or not funded at all, and so people need to be in a position to go without any kind of meaningful compensation for some period of time.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like regardless of your skill set, if you're going to be the first person in the door beyond the scientist, you better have a cheerleader mindset that I can raise some assets as well, right?
That's exactly right, and a healthy Rolodex.
Francis, this has been great. Unfortunately, we've got to leave it here. Kimon, thank you very much for co-hosting tonight's show. I want to let our viewers know that our next program is going to be with Tom Ronfala. Tom is from Syngenius, and Tom's going to be discussing cybersecurity. Also want to remind you that Money Matters is now available as an audible podcast on iTunes or Stitcher Radio, listed as Money Matters, the podcast for mobile devices. The video is available on our YouTube channel as well as our website. Thanks very much for tuning in tonight, and we'll see you next time.